Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson lived from 1743 to 1826. He was a primary founding father and wrote the Declaration of Independence. In the Declaration's first draft, he clearly was against slavery, arguing that the British were responsible for importing slaves to America and had waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere. While this was clearly anti-slavery, it was dropped due to opposition from those from South Carolina and Georgia. In 1769, as a member of the Virginia legislature, he tried to get slavery outlawed in Virginia, but failed. Yet he owned over 100 slaves of his own. He is known to have had a long-time affair with one slave, Sally Hemings, and to have fathered children with her. Their relationship spanned many of the years after his wife had died, but at least part of this affair occurred while he was still married. The degree to which this was a consensual relationship is clearly open to debate. His views on religion and government. In 1779, he helped pass the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which forcefully argued against the government supporting any religion in any official or monetary manner. Like Thomas Paine, he had highly controversial views on religion. He believed that Jesus was a wonderful moral example who had truly tapped the divine essence within himself, as a human, but did not believe that Jesus was actually God because he defined God as creator, first cause, not something that could be split into distinct persons, such as the Trinity. He also did not believe that miracles were true, but instead had been added to the Bible after the fact. He was clearly a deist. He actually revised his own version of the Bible that removed many of the supposed miracles and published this as the Jefferson Bible. He did not see this as anti-religious or even anti-Christian, but rather as a way of getting back to what he saw as the truth of Christianity. He believed in a wall of separation between church and state. This belief was the foundation for the First Amendment to the Constitution. He wasn't saying that people, or even himself, couldn't follow religion, just that he believed that government shouldn't get involved in it. As one of the nation's founding fathers, he first served in France while the Constitution was being written, and only corresponded with its writers. While many of his views are represented in the Constitution, such as the separation of church and state, he was consciously not invited to the convention because many Southern delegates believed he would argue too forcefully to include an outlawing of slavery in the Constitution itself. The Constitution created a stronger federal government than Jefferson would have liked, leaving the states with limited power. However, he was the primary force in insisting that Madison, the Constitution's primary writer, include a Bill of Rights, which protected the rights of individuals and of the states. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion were key among these. He served as ambassador to France and as the first Secretary of State, then vice president. In 1800, he ran for president, but ended in an electoral tie with Aaron Burr. This tie was decided by the House of Representatives, and he served 2 terms as president. In fact, he was the first Democrat to serve as president, and he was the 3rd president of the United States. He died on July 4, 1826, 50 years exactly after the Declaration of Independence, and it happened to be the same day as former President John Adams' death. Even though the two had been political rivals decades before, they had corresponded a great deal and became close friends after their presidential years. The Declaration of Independence was not only a bold political document which put at risk the lives of all who signed it, but it was also an important piece of literature. It was unique for its statements about human rights and the relationship between government and the people. The ideas contained within it dramatically shaped American culture and ideas. These thoughts also spread across Europe, inspiring Enlightenment thought and political reform there as well. It's not hard to notice the influence of Thomas Paine's ideas in the Declaration of Independence. Remember, Paine's Common Sense was one of the key documents of its time and sparked the calls for independence. It's important to look at the similarities between Paine's ideas and those expressed in Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. First, there was the belief that people had certain inalienable rights. There was also the idea of recognizing God's presence through the wonders of nature. They both also believe that government is a man-made thing, not something given by God, and that governments get the right to exist by consent of the governed, and in extreme cases that this consent can be revoked. Liberty, or personal freedom, is an inalienable human right in both of their views. Of the many writings that we have from Thomas Jefferson, the Notes on the State of Virginia, Query 7 on religion, is an important one because it expresses a lot of his views about religion and its relation to the role of government. Jefferson notes how in England, the Puritans had been oppressed because they maintained different religious views than the Anglican Church. He then points out that in Virginia, where he was governor at the time, the Assembly rejected all acts of British Parliament, in 1776, a few months before independence, that punished or made criminal any opinions on religion. He is arguing that the state and the newly American laws should not in any way punish people for differing religious opinions. He argues that reason is paramount, and that it will reveal the truth of true religion. He also believes it's crucial to allow for free inquiry so that people may think about religion in whatever way they like, so as to ultimately discover the truth. If people are forced, coerced, or thoughtlessly led to specific religious beliefs, they are not going to really know the truth of them or recognize error or potentially false beliefs. He points out that governments make mistakes, so that government should not get involved with religion. If the government tries to force belief, it is not going to get the same respect as if the people come to those ideas through their own free choice. He suggests that it's good to have a diversity of views in society, and he points out the countless bloodshed in the name of forcing religion on people, and says this coercion simply makes half the world fools and the other half hypocrites. This echoes Roger Williams' views from over 100 years beforehand. He also points out that a major reason to make sure that the government isn't connected to religion is because even those in the government right now are wise and good. Other lesser people in the future might abuse such laws and ultimately use them to punish righteous people. Another important writing from Thomas Jefferson is his letter to James Madison. This was written in response to the proposed Constitution. He generally accepts the form of federal government Madison and others have proposed. He sees key the idea that the representatives be elected by the people, although he eventually gives in and accepts that the Senate will be not elected directly by the people, but instead by state legislatures. That didn't actually change till 1913. He clearly argues for a Bill of Rights, to ensure that people's personal freedoms are protected. While not choosing all of the language, he basically wrote the Bill of Rights, and wouldn't give his consent to the Constitution unless it was added on. He believes these rights are not just good ideas, but things to which all human beings are naturally entitled. In his words, inalienable rights. Within this letter, he also expresses a great fear that politicians, particularly the president, might become entrenched in their positions. Therefore, he favored term limits, just like Thomas Paine. He preferred only one term because he thought the people would always stick with the same president unless a radical issue arose because they were generally used to monarchs. We actually see a contemporary result of this. There's 2-term limit for American presidents. In the state of Virginia, where Jefferson was first governor, a governor can only serve 1 term. This precedent goes back to Jefferson's thoughts within this letter. Jefferson wanted to see America primarily as an agricultural nation, not one focused on industry and commerce. He felt that a nation too focused on industrial economy would lead to money and power being overly concentrated in the hands of a small percentage of the people. This concern generally showed itself to be true as the cause of the Great Depression in the 1920s and 1930s. There, the problem was an overconcentration of wealth in the hands of a few due to the industrialization of the American economy.